that I saw you grab a cup of tea, I suppose.
Me here? Yeah, this is my coffee here.
So I've got mine as well. So I'm so to everyone who is attending and who is just joining in, this might be something you want to do. You probably want to grab yourself a cup of tea because we are going to be spilling a lot of things. Hi, Chris. Good to have you here.
Hello, guys. Yeah, nice to be here.
Awesome. So we're just going to get right into it. I was just saying that Dan and I have grabbed ourselves a mug with tea. So whatever it is, that's your thing. Grab it.
Welcome.
Awesome. I should say to everyone who is just attending, this was so unplanned. So I think you should grab yourself one as well. Okay, so we're going to get right into the program of today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cascades. This is going to be a conversation on brands, on corporate strategy, society, and innovation. But specifically for today, we're going to be discussing brands and movement marketing. And we'll be asking the questions how brands can thrive in the age of cultural and global societal movements. And I know that for a number of us who are joining in, it's possible that you're asking yourself, what is movement marketing? So we will get into that as we continue with the discussion. And you may have also obviously heard of the term movement, but for this conversation, we're not referring to the bodily exercise that we get into. For this movement, it's based around social and cultural behavior, which strives for a specific goal. You know, it's sort of like a form of collectivism within organizations, within communities that come together based on a value system or based on a belief, you know, and we find that it kind of pre-exists around conditions, around issues. And I think for those of us who are in Nigeria, those of us who are joining us from Nigeria, you would connect with this more with the very recent and very ongoing active End SARS movement. So that's pretty much where we'll be, getting all of these conversations around. And we've seen a lot of movements birthed in the past couple of years, in the past few years, let's say in the past 10 years or so, around sustainability, cultural movement, social movement, most recent with the Black Lives Matters movement, with the feminism movement, which then gave birth to the Me Too movement. You know, we've seen, like I mentioned, the End SARS movement as well, which we can easily identify with here in Nigeria. And what we've seen also is that brands have sort of found or looked for ways to piggyback on this conversation. You know, we've seen that with Nike, we've seen that even with Apple as well, and I think part of the questions and hopefully part of what we're going to be getting out of this discussion this evening will be how can local brands connect with this, plug in with this movement marketing, and what use will it be for them, long-term, short-term, in terms of their marketing goals and the marketing strategies, right? And this is like all of this conversation, the Cascades, is brought to you courtesy of Arden Newton. We'll talk about them more as we go. However, I'm not going to be the one, yapping on about this. I have with me here a member of the inventors, I think we can use that word, of the movement marketing, which is a model that we can use that, right? So we have a representative of that movement here with us today in the person of Dan. And we also have an expert voice. This is for you, Chris, in creativity, in media, in pop culture. He's an enthusiast, I would say, in those areas. We're really pleased to have both of you here with us today. So without further ado, I'm just going to read out your bio, Dan, and then we can do the same for Chris, and then we can have representation, if that's okay. All right, so Dan Langlitz is a group account director and the head of growth at Strawberry Frog. In his account role, he focuses on Northwell Health, which is New York's largest healthcare system. He's responsible for growing the client's business at Strawberry Frog through the movement thinking. Dan has developed his career in advertising at some of the most reputable international firms in the world, including Ogilvy, BBDO, and entertainment powerhouse Endeavor with 160/90. His advertising work for iconic brands has run on major media platforms, including Super Bowl, the Academy Awards, Daytona 500, NBA Finals, and more. I'm serious on that. Hi everyone, you want to mute, you want to mute. Okay, I think I should just do that.
I got 3K yesterday. That was on Tuesday. 5 hours on traffic. Yesterday I bought 4K. That's 7K. It's okay, 14.
1 second, please. Okay, all right, so I think we have mute for everyone. So as I was saying,
you're kindly just introducing me, I think.
Yes.
You're doing a great job. It's the world that we're living in today, where everything is happening on everyone can hear everybody's microphone and everything, and it's just the world that we have to learn to adapt to and live with these days.
Yeah.
You're doing great, and I'm happy to say hello.
Thank you. Let me just introduce. So Chris is recognized for creating some of the most talked about campaigns in Nigeria. Chris's works have been featured in the world's notable advertising compendiums. He has worked with a range of clients, including the British American Tobacco, MTN, Unilever, International Energy Insurance, Coca-Cola, and so much more, in agencies across Nigeria, Kenya, and the UAE. Now, he has been a part of the grand jury for the New York Advertising Festival Awards. He's judged the AD Stars Awards in South Korea, and he was recognized as Nigeria's Creative Personality of the Year in 2019 by the Marketing Edge magazine. He's a thought leader on creativity, media, literature, and pop culture. He speaks at conferences and universities, and he's currently building a team of pirates who will find the smartest solutions to social problems. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome both of our really remarkable speakers to this evening's edition of the Cascades. So just a few house rules. Please put all of your phones or your mics on mute. We'll do that from our end anyways. And I think you should also know that this webinar is recorded. So it means that after this conversation, you will have the recording forwarded to your emails if you registered, obviously, for this webinar. Yeah, we also will be taking questions. So please listen as Dan takes us through his presentation. And without further ado, Dan, it's over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. Hey, everybody. Hey, Chris. It's nice to meet you guys. It's nice to see you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you as well. I'm sorry, just before you just go in, there's something particularly masturbatory about counting people's bio in their present. Like I felt so awkward.
I know.
Really, really awkward.
Yeah. Sorry to put you through that torture.
Oh, you did a great job. I guess I get a little embarrassed too myself. I'm like, oh, okay, you know, you have to write them about yourself, and then you end up hearing it back, and you're like, man, maybe I would have been a little more humble. But anyway, it's nice to see you guys. I see on the names on the right side of my screen, I see my friend Perez over there, and so I want to say hi to Perez. So I'm Dan Langlitz. I'm with Strawberry Frog in New York, and I'm so excited to be invited to participate in this and to have a few moments of your time to speak to you. I think I have maybe 25 or 30 minutes or something like that. So I actually prepared a set of presentation slides that I can pull up. Is that okay if I pull them up on my screen and share my screen and go through that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Fine. Okay. Yes. Yeah. But before I do that, I mean, just to not be like presenting on slides the whole time. So, Strawberry Frog is an interesting place in that we exclusively talk about the work that we do in terms of movements. And I just want to say what's happening right now in many places in the world, but especially in Nigeria, and we think about Lagos, is so relevant. And certainly from America, from the United States, from New York, our hearts and thoughts definitely with you guys. It is garnering international appeal, what has happened there recently. Glad that my friends there are okay. And I know that people like me stand with you guys. And it's just, it happens to be very relevant right now with what we're talking about, movements. Strawberry Frog believes that, Strawberry Frog believes and was really founded with this belief in mind that brands can create movements in a very similar way that societal movements take place. I'll talk for, in a little bit. Every great piece of communication that's out there that people and more young people these days want to be a part of is hitched to something that's a truth in culture. It's a truth that we say is on the rise in culture. And so that's what we look for when we develop creative work, when our creative teams are writing and designing. We're thinking about what's going on in culture that's relevant to this brand who's a client of ours, and what can this brand say exclusively in that area that makes them more and more credible and relevant. And so when we do communications with action and actualizing purpose. In Frog's 22 years old. It was founded in Amsterdam, as you guys might know. Now we're only in New York, although we are a team of international people. We're a very global team in terms of who our employees are. We're a diverse team. And during the coronavirus and the pandemic and everything, we've had some people go back home to various countries, and we're an international team at this point, working from home in that way. I'm in Brooklyn right now. I'm in my apartment. I live in New York, but I've got colleagues who went back to Paris, Sweden, Canada, kind of all spread out. And we take pride in the fact that, historically speaking, Strawberry Frog has been a very international brand. So Amsterdam, there's been times when we've been in India, and we've been in Brazil, and now, of course, New York. So we like to look at movements and we look at things from an international perspective. And that's a perspective that we bring to brands. Amazing markets in the African countries, including Nigeria, and just amazing companies and amazing economies over there. So I want to pull up my presentation here and take you through a little bit more about what we mean by movement marketing, and show you a few case studies at the end to kind of ground things. And then I'm really looking forward to any questions that might come up later. So let me see if I have the ability to pull this up, and it looks like it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So maybe you could allow me to pull this up, and then I can go ahead and do that. And if not, I can just kind of, I can continue to talk, but you'll just have to look at me the whole time.
I'm trying to give you the ability to present.
Yeah, no problem at all. And so I'll just, yep.
Yeah, I think you can try that to see. Let's see if that works.
Okay, we'll give it a shot.
Are you able to?
Let me try now. No, not yet. Let's see. I'm just clicking the share screen button at the bottom.
I think you can try now.
Perfect. Yeah, this is going to work. Okay, give me one second. And let's see here. You might just get a glance at my desktop here for a second, and possibly my calendar, and how to move this out of the way. And here we go. Okay, hang on one second, you guys. Does that look like full screen to you?
Yes.
Does that look like full screen? Okay, you can't see my calendar and all that good stuff. Okay. Okay, fantastic. So you already met me. My email, if anybody wants to chat afterwards, just have an ongoing conversation, Dan@strawberryfrog. This is our CEO, Scott Goodson. I don't know how much everybody who's participating knows about Strawberry Frog, but Scott, he's still our leader. He's our founder and our CEO. He's an author. He's a great guy. He is not joining this webinar right now, so I'm not saying these things because he's listening. He's not listening. But Scott's very much involved in the business day to day here at Strawberry Frog. And he started Strawberry Frog, like I said, in Amsterdam 22 years ago with the belief that brands can create movements in the same way that we see societal movements happening in our communities, in our countries, and around the world. And Scott's written a couple of books. So some of you may have read his book, Uprising, which is how to build a brand and change the world with movements. And he's got an exciting new book coming next year. So more to come on that. It's going to be called Activate Brand Purpose. And that'll be out next year in the first quarter, probably around March or something like that. We want you to know that, we got a lot of good things going on right now. We're very proud of the work that we just submitted to the Muse Creative Awards, and we brought home a bunch of awards recently. I mostly show this because we know that awards aren't everything. They're certainly not everything to us or to our clients, and we shouldn't put too much weight into awards, but movements are done with effectiveness in mind and not just to get an amazing piece of creative work out there. We do it to help our clients' business. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a couple of minutes. And then we're a small company. Strawberry Frog is at the moment about 40 full-time people. It's not very big. And so we're on the list of America's fastest growing private companies. We're independent. And we're proud to do some really powerful and impactful work as an independent small company right now. That's something that we're really happy with. So, whoops, I don't know why that happened there because I clicked something. Sorry, guys. Here we go. So what I wanted to do was just ask everybody to just think about a purpose that inspires you, just you personally. So this might be, your own purpose. This might be something that really moves you. For me, it would be something like I like to, build other people up, whether that's at work or just friendships in the community, be involved in the community. I think a personal purpose of mine is to really help build my friends up and build up people in the community. And that's something that I love to do at work, whether it's mentorships or training or working with interns or whatever. And so leading people in that way, but also in my community. So just like you to think about a purpose that inspires you personally. And then from there, what would that look like if you could share that purpose out in the world? And you probably already do. So what does that look like? How do you walk in that purpose as an individual, as a person in your community, maybe with your family and your friends every single day? In other words, how do you activate your purpose out in the world? Well, I bring it up because that's what we mean by developing movements. And Strawberry Frog's purpose as an organization is creativity for good. We want to do good in the world. We want to work with clients who want to do good in the world and people who want to be good and do good and do right by others. And so we really look at our business and who we choose to work with and who chooses to work with us through this filter. It's never just creativity for advertising's sake. In fact, we talk about movements being different than advertising, even though they fill media plans in the way that advertising does. So we want to do creativity for good at our organization, and our culture is very much about that. We've built a culture that's all about being a good teammate, being a good leader, being sort of a good citizen of the world and our community. So that's our purpose. And so we try to activate our own purpose by bringing that to the table in every single interaction that we have with our clients and our production partners and our own employees at Strawberry Frog. As we think about what it means to have a movement and how we define a movement, well, we talk about movement thinking. So we'll apply this lens of activating a purpose. This is why I asked you to think about your personal purpose, activating a purpose in the world through movement thinking. We know that many brands and many companies talk about having a purpose, but they don't actually activate it in any particularly meaningful way. Maybe it's on someone's desk, or maybe it's just on a plaque on the wall behind them, but they're not walking the walk, you know, talking the talk, but they're not walking it and backing it up. So what we do is we help clients with movement, develop a movement through movement thinking. That means that every time we think about, okay, what's this movement? We put the human first. We'll put the consumer first, or the employee first, if we're doing this for a big organization for just their employees, for example, like what we do for Walmart as, you know, America's biggest retailer, biggest. This technique uses the principles of societal movements to mobilize people and to get them to rally around the movement and be involved in what matters to them. And we do that in two different ways. We do it inside an organization and outside of an organization. I'll talk about that. But when you think about how to define a movement, this is what we say. It rallies people, that could be consumers, clients, customers, prospects, board members, shareholders, leaders in the organization, around a common initiative, a common belief, or a common set of values. This is why I bring up, you know, NSARS or Black Lives Matter movement, or any number of societal movements that we see in the world right now. What is that? It's a group of people who all have the same conviction, the same belief in something, and they're willing to fight for it, stand for it, speak up, speak out. And we believe that we can do the same thing for organizations, taking those principles of movements and applying it to leadership, doing it through trust, motivation, ultimately creativity at the end of the day, because you know, our final product is creative work. But again, it's got to be moving people, and it's got to be getting people to all rally around a common cause for an organization. Strawberry Frog does movements in two different ways. One is inside of an organization and one is outside. So movement inside, and they both fall under movement thinking as the umbrella sort of strategic approach. Movement inside is when we're developing a movement for an organization that only their employees will really see. So possibly many of your organizations, these would be typically larger companies in size and scale. They have many employees, thousands of employees in many cases. And we help their leaders. A lot of times it's an HR person, like a chief human resources officer or a CEO, CMO, design a movement that speaks to the employees. And it's a way to get people to really buy into the culture of their organization and be active participants. We know that organizations that have people who are bought into the organization's, the company's purpose, and feel like they're really involved, are more effective as companies and as teams. So sometimes Strawberry Frog just does this movement inside work just for the employees. And Walmart, the work that we do for Walmart as a client, is one example of that. Movement outside is going to look more like advertising. So you would see a commercial, you would see digital, you would see stuff on, you know, on Facebook and other social platforms, for example, websites, out of home, out in the world, print, but it would all be tied together with a common thread of that movement that I talked about. So we do this for brands. And what we do is we go through a whole, you know, strategic process and strategic rigor that I'm not talking about right now, just for the sake of time, to develop a movement platform that would have a name, that would be the name of a movement. It would have a manifesto and a motto behind it that would sound a little bit like a tagline, possibly. And everything that we do would be done with activation of that movement in mind. So this is an external marketing campaign. It fills a media plan. I'm going to show you some work in a little bit for movement outside thinking. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's never a one-way thing where we're just advertising at people. And and that's not to diminish advertising at all. In fact, most of my background is at bigger advertising firms, but this is just a principle, which is sort of more, we approach communications from a very two-way dialogue perspective. And as I said before, very action-oriented standpoint. Sometimes we do both for clients. So sometimes we're doing a movement inside and a movement outside for a client, but sometimes we're just doing one or the other, and we can be flexible in that way. Over the years, we're very grateful to have worked with a lot of amazing clients, a lot of big brands. I know that there's some overlap here with what Chris has worked on. So this is not our current client roster. Some of these are current clients right now. For example, Walmart, Northwell Health, Woody Creek, LifeBridge Health, and others. But just historically speaking, Strawberry Frog has worked with many big, powerful, iconic global brands over the years. I actually want to show you two quick cases, and I'll keep it brief in the interest of time, or maybe three quick cases I think I have here, just to show you what I'm talking about, and bring it to life a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, we do a lot of, but we need to deliver in a creative way and in a really world-class, high-quality, creative way to express that movement and bring it out to people, whether those people are the buyers, the customers and consumers, or, as I said, if they're the employees at an organization. So one thing that I wanted to show you was Emirates Airline. So, a few years ago now, I'd say this is probably a, 6 or 7 year old case study, but it's pretty relevant because it's an international brand. At the time, it was a brand when they engaged us that people only thought of as like a Middle Eastern airline, basically. And they knew that that was an issue. They knew that they weren't just a Middle Eastern airline and that there was so much more that they could say about the brand. And there was so much more that they could open up to people in terms of possibilities if you choose to travel with them. Emirates also existed in a category where all of the conversation was about, like, how do we fill seats? What's the economy of it? What's the pricing? And that's typically not what we like to talk about when we do movements. We like to elevate the brand and put it on a platform that's kind of elevating out of the category and making it stand for something much larger. And this is what Emirates hired us to do. So our movement for Emirates was actually more about, pushing back against typical misunderstandings and misconceptions, for one thing about the brand, but for another about that in the same way that people have about each other, and showing people that we live in a very connected world and anything is possible. It's really amazing that we can I could fly to where you are in a matter of hours and be there tomorrow. It's a really amazing thought when you think about travel and connecting the world in that way. And honestly, going back to some points that I made earlier about how we're thinking of you with the movement that's going on in Nigeria, for example, with my friends there. It's such a small world. There's such parallels to what we have going on here in the United States, fighting for equality and fighting for social justice and against injustices. Reminds you just how small and connected the world is, right? Certainly does that for me. So for Emirates, I'm just gonna play you. Hopefully you can hear the audio. I apologize if you can't, but if you can't, I'll send this around afterwards, just so that we're not trying to fix kind of tech glitches throughout the presentation. So hopefully this plays for you guys, and it's gonna pop up in a different YouTube window. So hang on. So that was the Hello Tomorrow movement. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's see, get back to the full screen over here if I can. And then this is integrated body of work. So as I said, you know, that was a spot that ran online, that ran on TV. So you'll see that the work that we do fulfills media plans in a similar way as advertising. But it's going to be about a purpose and activating a purpose in the world and standing for something much more. So the Hello Tomorrow movement for Emirates, you know, it covered 150 of their markets, so very global in nature. I mean, that's a ton of places. It had TV, digital, out of home, social. This is just an example of some of that, and really trying to help them connect the world. And for consumers, letting them know that Emirates is about connectivity, appealing to humanity and the best of human nature, and showing people that, you know, the world is a smaller place than sometimes we think it is, a very interconnected place. Still a relevant message today, if you think about it. So you can see how integrated that was. For SunTrust, we have what we call the Onwards and Upwards movement, On Up for short. So SunTrust, On Up. SunTrust is a bank here in the United States, in Atlanta. They've recently merged with another bank, and now they're not called SunTrust anymore. They're called Truist. And the movement that we originally did for SunTrust, the On Up movement, was against financial insecurity and how that makes people feel really uncomfortable in many different aspects of their life, and for taking control of your finances and building financial confidence in that way. So right here, it's worth mentioning that whenever we develop a movement at Strawberry Frog, we find an enemy for the brand to push back against, kind of a tension. So what's the enemy that they want to push against? And then what do they want to stand for? And that helps us figure out what the movement should be, where it sort of lives in culture. So here the movement was against, the enemy was financial insecurity that people feel. That manifests in their lives in a lot of different negative ways, mental health, for example, and even physical health, and for financial confidence. And I'll show you an example of the video that we did for this.
Hold your breath. Hold it. Hold it. Keep holding. At first, you feel fine. Then panic sets in. What you're feeling now is just like the financial stress that millions of us feel. It's like you're drowning. Meanwhile, big things, little things, the moments that matter, slip away. SunTrust is about to help America catch its breath by lighting the way to financial confidence, to help you make smart choices to move forward, onward, and upward. So now, let go and breathe. Feel that relief? Take the first step. Join the movement at onup.com.
Okay, so join the movement at onup.com. This is what that looked like. We're currently over 6 million participants in the movement. Most of our movements have a sort of a central way for people to participate. So even if we're doing a TV spot like what I just showed you, it's driving people to participate in the movement in some way. So for SunTrust and now Truist, what's called Truist, the On Up movement gave people a toolkit, gave people ways to sign up to actively take control over their financial health and vitality, if you will. And this included their employees, actually. Their employees, because, you know, employees are dealing with the same thing too. And as employers, we all should be mindful of how our employees feel and how's their, you know, financial situation and how's their health in general. So this 6 million participants included employees getting behind it, and also people out in the community. There's much more I could say about that, but in the interest of time, I'm just showing you some highlights. And then this is just some great press that SunTrust received. I think the initial goal of the movement was to get to maybe, you know, 2 or 3 million people. And so they ended up surpassing that and eclipsing it in a pretty significant way. And then finally, this is a pride and joy for me because I work on Northwell Health here in New York as a client every day. This is my main client that I work on in addition to my other responsibilities here at Strawberry Frog. And Northwell Health is New York State's biggest health provider as a health system, not just hospitals, but doctors that you would see for a wellness visit or an outpatient visit just to go get a checkup, any number of different things. And they came to us in 2019 as a new client, and they said, hey, we want to do something different that breaks the mold for a healthcare system. And we know how important healthcare is. This is all prior to COVID-19 and the pandemic, which is really interesting. We had to experience all of that with the health system as a client throughout the last 8 months, which has been really amazing and fascinating to do. So we developed a movement to activate purpose for a health system, New York's largest health provider and largest nonprofit employer, 75,000 employees. It's a big system in New York State. And the thing that we discover is that individuals and the health system itself believe that people are better off if they're also taking active ownership over their own health. So not just relying on doctors, not just walking into a doctor's office to say, hey, I'm sick, or, fix me, but people are better, they're healthier, they live longer lives if they're taking active ownership as a really active participant over their own health. We developed this whole movement before COVID-19, the coronavirus came around, and we had this big plan in place that we actually had to flip at the last minute in March when everything really came to New York with the coronavirus and change our plan. But we came up with this movement that we called the Together We Well movement, Together We Well, which really still works. And Together We Well worked during COVID-19 because suddenly the onus was on citizens of the community to look out for one another, to wear your mask, to protect not just yourself, but other people, to be healthy, to live a really healthy life, and to be safe out there. And so Together We Well was a movement that we developed, but never introduced before the pandemic. And it's something that really worked during the pandemic. We just had to change our work. So what we did was, I'll show you one commercial that we did to actually launch the Together We Well movement. And we did this commercial, just so you know, and Chris, you could probably appreciate this too, as a creative guy, we had to figure out how to write this and produce it in like March and April when the coronavirus was really at its peak, especially in New York City where we are and where Northwell is. And so we ended up animating it because we couldn't go film anything anywhere. And our team did all this work from their various apartments that were really spread out, and the production company too, and our clients too. But we really, there's a lot of camaraderie in our team culture, and we really banded together to get this done during the pandemic and to launch this work. And so this is, I'll show you our Together We Well commercial here.
Compassion is my passion. Empathy is my gift. My growth is incremental as my consciousness shifts. I believe that life is good, even when it hurts to see. I believe in you and me. I believe in superheroes, but I don't look for them above, because they exist inside us all. Can we save the day with love?
So that commercial, that's we call it the Fearless Leader spot as part of the movement, where our hero little girl there, she's putting on her self-made mask at home and in the hospital, and she's going out and leading the doctors in New York City and fighting that's the big virus that we see right there. So that actually came out, like I said, in April at the height of the coronavirus. And it really it was intended to show people that, we're all better when we're working together. And the Together We Well movement continues to this day. Let me show you this one too, and then I'm done. I wrap up after this. I'm cognizant of the time. And
Dan, so did you say the campaign was not published?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was published. Yeah.
Okay.
It is, Chris. Yeah. And so we basically, what you're thinking of is what I said was we had this whole different campaign that we were ready to film and produce for Together We Well in February. And then when the coronavirus came, we had to stop everything, full stop, right? Everything came to a halt. And we had to do something else to launch this work and to tell people that Northwell Health is here for you during the pandemic. what you should be doing, because nobody at the time knew what was going on in February and March, and it was getting pretty bad here in New York in terms of the virus. So there was an education process. You know, what is social distancing? Why should I wear a mask? Why is it important for me to, wash my hands for 20 seconds and stuff? But that was a brand new Together We Well creative campaign from the original one. So Chris, the original one never got published. We changed during the pandemic and did all of this work that I'm showing you now, but we still did it under the Together We Well banner, because right, because that movement still stands the test of time. And that's how we try to develop movements, not year by year, but what's a movement that could last 10 years, which would be a lot, but that'll be a good vision. What's a movement that could last 10 years? And then the campaigns that we do within that could change year to year. So Together We Well was a good example. So then we did this one, and we did this one that I'm about to play. Let's see, I think in September. So, or August or September. So a couple months ago. So now we're well into the pandemic. We're doing much better in New York. Our options are still limited in terms of, what we can go out and produce. And so what we wanted to do was say, hey, as part of the Together We Well movement, New Yorkers, you've done great, because the audience for this is New York people, guys. That's why I'm saying New Yorkers. So it's the New York region. New Yorkers, you've done an amazing job squashing the pandemic as best as possible. We're still not out of it. Continue to work together and do your part. So whereas the animated commercial that I just showed you was at the beginning of everything, this was more recent, and I'll show you how this evolved a little bit.
Dear New York, how are you holding up? Yeah, us too. But we were built for this. We have a history of doing what needs to be done and finding ways to do it better. Listen, we don't have a crystal ball, but whatever comes next, we'll be ready. So take care of yourself and each other. Love, Northwell.
So that one we actually did film. We spent a day with a director. We got out into the city and into the suburbs on Long Island, and we filmed it, and we did the artwork with original artists. So this is original artwork and filmed, and we pulled this together in a matter of weeks. It was very, very fast. The voiceover guy, I don't know if you recognize him. He's a famous actor, at least here. His name is Steve Buscemi, and he did the voice for us. And then this is, as I said before, with the SunTrust On Up movement, we developed a hub as well. And this counter here that you see, which is over 2 million people, is people who are coming to togetherwewell.com, which is still live, and they're looking at ways online to be healthier, basically. And so this was the central hub for this particular movement. And that movement continues to this day for Northwell. So it's been 8 months now or something like that. And it's very different than how we originally thought it would be, but it really works. Some of those Muse Creativity Awards that I showed in the beginning, about 5 of them were for this work that I'm showing you now. So it's done well with the creative judges. And Chris, you can keep me honest because you're a creative guy. Hopefully you like that, but you can tell me what you think. And that's what we have going on for Northwell. So I think I'm pretty much at my half hour now, guys, maybe a little more. So thanks for listening to me, take you through what Strawberry Frog does. And again, easy email, dan@strawberryfrog.com. That's me. That's where you can find me. I really appreciate having the opportunity to share that with you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. Really detailed, really exhaustive, very interesting, and also captivating. Thank you for taking us through the journey. I feel like a lot of us would have a better insight into what it is that the term, the concept of movement marketing is, and how that would apply, with us as individuals, first of all, and then with us as it relates to our various organizations and other causes that we may be connected to. Now over to you, Chris. Right? I know that you don't have a presentation. However, what I would appreciate, and what I think that a lot of our attendees would appreciate from your end, Chris, Dan, we'll come to you with some questions as well, but let me just forward that to Chris, would be a lot of what Dan has showed us has so much of an international element. It's more situated to outside of our locality. So my question to you would be, how can we localize, this seemingly rising and interesting trend of marketing movement, or movement marketing rather, to Nigeria, to Africa? And as you answer that question, if you could also address what trends in terms of social, in terms of cultural, that, or even in terms of pop culture as well, that you may have seen that we can also pick up on and leverage that in terms of movement marketing.
Yeah, thank you. I think the best way to start this is, well, Dan, thank you for that impressive presentation. I think that was really cool.
Thanks.
I'll try to be on the lookout in the jury session if I'm going to see that work, to allow me to be biased when I'm judging that work internationally. So that said, I think what Dan has nicely done was to find a way to, shall I say, summarize the importance of movement marketing. And beyond that is also the fact that of course, he has dwelled so much about the branding aspect of it, but I actually think it's just a universal phenomenon, in the sense that as humans, I think there's something about us, there's something about the human nature, I would say, that seems to yearn for something meaningful. To be something within us. Maybe you can argue that is why religion is relevant. Some kind of, we are drawn to some pursuit of higher purpose. And then within the context of branding, we now realize that perhaps because of the shift that has been going on in the world, from people asking tough questions, and also the way technology and social media has allowed people to be more expressive, has given people this rather democratic power to voice themselves. I think what then happened is that cultural movements have now become that thing that comes to answer that human yearning for a higher purpose. So people will gravitate rather more comfortably, towards brands that seem to stand for something that addresses their yearning, right? And within the local, shall I say, within our Nigerian space, it is not particularly new, because I know there are brands that seem to have been, applying the principles of cultural movement in their everyday. It might not be in the same scale as you would expect, compared to, say, for instance, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, compared to, say, the way it is done in the international space. And one other thing that I think Dan sort of touched on is that you don't necessarily have to. It doesn't have to be something of. Movement doesn't have to be something of a real big scale, like something profound or something of epic level, right? It could go from the mundane, the similarly mundane, right, to things that can be almost in the scale of civil rights or NSAS or Black Lives Matters and all of these things. And I would like to mention the few brands that I know in Nigeria that has been playing in that space, where there's a kind of rallying call, to have people to support a cause. And it was good that he mentioned again that people will respond. You have to sort of have something you are fighting against, some form of Goliath, in a way, that you're trying to contend with. So there is a small platform, and I know it's a young lady that runs it, which she calls For Creative Girls. It's a website. I think it's actually named for creative, something like that, For Creative Girls. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I find it, as small, as random as it is, I like it because there is inherently something about it that is saying that you have to, as a young girl, right, there might be some kind of yearning to be expressive, to become creative, and maybe the way the world is structured, you don't have so much platform, right? And then this I don't know, shall I call it startup, has now become a solution to that. So why people will gravitate, or so far people have been gravitating towards it, is not necessarily because it gives them the vainglory feeling that we are part of something that can go viral or something that will make us famous in any sense. It's just because it touches a very unique human side of them, about the fact that, and I think that is how cultural movement, and I'm sure majority of people on this call, I think, will probably be familiar with Slum to School. So in a way, it's a form of cultural movement in a sense, so you have a bunch of less privileged young people somewhere who can do with access to certain education and resources, and you have people who come together. And then I gathered that most of the volunteers, most of the people that are part of that movement aren't paid. It's just free. It's just some passion project, and that makes it authentic, and people will find a way to do that. And then maybe on the extreme side, you have NSAS, which has become our new poster example of cultural movement.
Yes.
And I know there are multiplicity of diverse opinion about whether it was successful or it was not successful. I'm not a judge for that, but I believe that within the scope of how the movement started and how it sustained itself in a way, you would say it was remarkably successful because there was no promise of anything tangible, or maybe in marketing speak, there was no promise of profit. There was no profit of bottom line. People were able to key into the spirit of the campaign, which is what cultural movement is really about, which is to say that how can we stir up some feeling that will seem to tap into the very, spirit or culture or essence of the period. So you have young people who are literally saying that we are tired of, the way we are being governed, or, in another way, when you say brutality, police brutality and all of those things, you didn't need to tell anyone, for instance, that you have to join us and then you get paid. You didn't need to tell anyone that if you don't join us, you're going to miss out in life. It was just because, right, intrinsically, it offered them something that seems to answer a deep side of them, right? So on the overall, one could say that it's about time brands, just if we have to take lead from brands who are, international brands, foreign brands, that have been able to do this successfully. Some of the clientele from Strawberry Frog, and some of the ones that we know, when you go from Nike to maybe Pepsi and all of these guys who have been able to associate their brand narrative to some form of, I don't want to say political, some kind of cultural statement, and it's still a feed for us. It's some form of opportunity that I think that we can still explore. And it is our duty to ensure that brands come to know about this. And I'm grateful that Arden Newton is doing this, which if at the end of the day, it becomes some form of reports that can be shared and downloaded, share in a wider reach for people in the marketing industry, it might go a long way in also finding a way to entrench the cultural movement, cultural movement into the way we run, we help businesses to grow and all of that. So right. Again, in my own creative space, the beauty of this is, of cultural movement, it allows you to tell compelling stories at a very high conceptual level, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you're saying to yourself that people really want to be moved in a way. And the best way to move them is when you can tap into certain kind of emotions. So as a storyteller, as a creative person, that already provides some form of raw material that you can then use, as a canvas to tell stories. From the examples that Dan shared, for instance, I'm familiar, of course, with the Emirates campaign, and then you can tell, for instance, that if the creative guy that worked on that brief, they're probably going to be so in heaven about saying that there is a brand that is telling them that we need to open the world. We need to make the world, you have to say hello, So in my own thinking, I'm going to be grateful, and looking for how best to tell stories that is literally giving me the power to open the world, just by power of creativity. So I think in every sense, that is what I have to add to what.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. So if I'm hearing for what I'm hearing from you and what I'm hearing from Dan, you are saying that it's time, like it's about time that more brands, connected with telling more compelling stories, telling more stories that tap into the emotions, of their consumers, of their clients. And then Dan is also saying the same thing about putting together movement marketing strategies that would drive people to participate. Now, my question to both of you, Dan, I suppose you could go first, you could take it first, would be, what does it take? What would it take to elevate a brand's marketing strategy into a brand-fueled experience that would truly resonate with consumers? And if you could try to make this as, granular as possible, I think that would be very relevant to our attendees.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a great question. Well, for starters, I think it takes the right type of leadership who wants to do something like that at an organization. So I think that it takes somebody who has a big vision and knows that we don't always have to be into the, talking about price points, and there is a place for that in a communications plan. There's no doubt that we do that type of work too, if you want to look at a marketing funnel sort of down at the bottom. But it would have to start with people who have a big ambition and see the meaning and the purpose of doing something like purpose-driven work and like a movement. And then they communicate that throughout the organization. And they, as a leader, they're effective in getting people inspired to feel the same way. Without that, it's not going to happen. So you have to have the right people behind it. So once you have that, and then you have the right team on board from, let's say, a brand, a company, organization, then you have to be willing to roll your sleeves up and do the hard work, figuring out, what's the enemy, what's the tension that we're going to push back on, what are we against, what are we really against, and like Chris said, in a way that appeals to humans, not just thinking about the product, but really like putting people first, putting the human being first. What are we against? What do we really stand for? And put those things through, a trial. So you're not always going to get it right away. You might come up with some great ideas that turn out to be just wrong, not the right thing. So it takes some strategic legwork and some research and trial and error to get it right. And spending some time, kind of figuring out what the right articulations of an emotionally appealing, purpose-driven movement would be. And then once you land that as a platform, I think everything can kind of fall into place. Once you know that you have everything really sorted and you have a powerful movement expression that an organization is bought into at all levels, and that consumers are going to rally around, then I think it becomes a lot easier for the right stuff to fall into place.
Right. Okay.
Right. That's kind of how I would answer it at a high level.
Fantastic. So leadership, be willing to do the hard work, and of course, give it some trial and know that you might not get it at the first shot of it. Okay. So Chris, if you could give us your insight.
Yeah, I think one other thing is to find that point of tension that you are particularly addressing. Yes, leadership is key, like he had mentioned. And one of the other things is you can't just have a movement for the sake of it. You have to seem to rally around some form of a point of tension, let me put it that way. And what a point of tension really means is that kind of barrier, some kind of wall that seems to be between you and some form of ideal. So the ideal might be that I want, we want our brand to, or rather, we want people to feel in a certain kind of way. Maybe, for instance, the context of the pandemic. Now I see a lot of organizations are trying to tell people about mental health. And that is coming from the back of the fact that, one of the consequences of the pandemic, of Corona, is really because we were not many of us were wired to deal with the shock at the very, psychological level. So if we then have brands who can identify that as a tension and find a way to link that to the purposes of their brand, you know, it goes a long way in also finding a way to articulate some kind of movement for the brand. So
Right.
which at the execution level, at the structural level, that might now go into, do you want to have a website, you know, or do you want to have an app, you know, whatever, which of course would be some form of branded assets for the brand, and in which the brand is now using as a point of addressing the tension of making people's lives way better. So yes, leadership. And on the other hand, I think a clear purpose that is woven around a point of tension.
Yeah, I have something to add. I think that's really right. And when we say find an enemy for your brand, which will help you find the positive, if you know what you're against, then you can know what you stand for. It's as Chris was saying, we'll say that's a dissatisfaction in the world, something you're not satisfied with, which I think, to build on what Chris said, is the barrier between where you are and where you want to be. I'm dissatisfied with inequality, for example. That's not acceptable to me. And that's a dissatisfaction that we have. I'm dissatisfied with violence and brutality. And, you know, that's not going to be acceptable to me. What do we then stand for? And that helps you launch into figuring out what to call your movement and what it's really all about.
Fantastic. Makes sense. I can see how this can also relate with, say, for someone in the fashion industry who might be dissatisfied with the kind of waste that we have on, and the climate effects that, you know, repeat purchases have on the, you know, on the climate and on the earth in general. So probably that's where you have the birth of sustainable fashion, and that could be like a purpose that an entrepreneur could tie to their brand and to, you know, the movement they want to align with. So I have a few more questions, but we'll take some questions from our attendees.
If you allow me, I think the example you gave, you know, really offers a nice illustration. So I suppose, you know, I'm sure if we check the chat box at some point, someone might just be really saying, you know, they need some clarity in terms of what purpose really is and meeting your brand, I mean, a brand commercial objective, right? So if you have a fashion brand, for instance, and the fashion brand decides to say the enemy to rally against might be, or maybe they say they have some form of corporate purpose to ensure that there's an improvement in the environment in a way, and therefore they identify big companies, big organizations, you know, who would readily, you know, throw in, you know, cause pollution and all of this kind of thing. So as a fashion brand, we identify that as the enemy in a way, and therefore, how do we create a narrative that will make people rally towards this, as to say, we indeed deserve a clean society, a clean environment, right? Even though we're a fashion brand, so we are rallying towards this. We are aligning our essence, you know, towards this, and on the back of that will be against the enemy, which is represented, for instance, by the big organizations who are polluting everything, right? So I hope that sort of put that into perspective.
It does. Thank you. So let's take a question from Cynthia. Cynthia is asking, isn't there a difference between social enterprises and movement marketing? Because I think Slum to School is a social innovative enterprise addressing the social problem in Nigeria, and not necessarily a movement.
I think that's a good question. I think that's a good question. It goes back to what I said. Yeah, I mean, I sort of envisaged that.
Yeah.
So the thing is, there is the general way of looking at the cultural movement thing, and of course there is still, which you can then bring Slum to School under, you know, however you call it, a social enterprise or whatever you. In itself, it's a movement in general terms. Now, at the level of marketing would then be, how has an organization been able to align its very functional objective, right, with this emotional need, right, which is what I think organizations like Strawberry Frog, you know, exist to address. So Slum to School indeed is a social enterprise, but it also offers us a good illustration to explain that they do not exist because they're obsessed with their bottom line. They do not exist because they want to talk about certain metrics, you know, some kind of marketing metrics in any sense. If they have to tell you what they are doing, they're telling you that they have a higher purpose, and we are rallying against such things as illiteracy. We're rallying against things about deprivation for certain kind of people in the society. These are enemies that we are rallying against. And because of that, we have a pool of disciples, a pool of volunteers who have been able to key into this essence. And then we are using this to drive this. I think the common thing to be clear about is that there has to be some kind of shared dream, some shared aspiration, some shared goal that the organization is aiming towards, right? And by aiming towards it, it then sort of build a tribe of people, call them loyalists, call them whatever it is, who are willing to sacrifice their time, who are willing to support the cause, because it fits into certain kind of orientation that they have about themselves, about the need for change or the need for growth or for a change and for a need to see things to be improved in one way or the other. So it might not necessarily be in the context of the marketing thing for Slum to School, but from a very general point of view, Slum to School in itself is a movement worth talking about.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Chris, for providing insights into that. I think I like this next question that we have here. It's from Tunde Aribudo, rather. He says, from a reputation point of view, how would a corporate brand in Nigeria support a movement, given that a lot of them are still tied to the umbilical cord of their investors and shareholders who have interests, and on the other hand, they have governments at all levels to contend with? So he's saying that from a point of view of creativity and human connection, the movement marketing is really spot on. However, in terms of relationship building with stakeholders, is this something you would advise a large corporate to adopt, both in long term and short term?
I can attempt to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the question is to me, right?
Yeah. Was somebody else speaking?
No, you can go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just attempt to answer it. So, and this is, not with a political lens in mind or understanding what it's like to do business in Nigeria. That would be my caveat. But when we look at similar challenges here on some companies that we work with, we get those stakeholders involved in the beginning of the process. We actually invite them into the process. We're doing that right now, for example, with some board members and various stakeholders at different companies. When we approach strategy, we want to, like many companies do, we do like a whole deep dive and immersion and getting to know you process as part of our process. And we know that a movement this is a very astute question, because we know that a movement is not going to go anywhere if the right stakeholders from the business side are not able to find a way to support it. At the end of the day, we're still helping businesses run their business and make a bottom line, unlike necessarily a nonprofit, for example. So what we would do is we would invite those stakeholders into the process, and we would invite those investors into the process. And we would say, what's your vision for where this organization could go? Why are you bought into it? What's good, what's bad, what's working, what's not, what's your dissatisfaction, and what are you happy with? And we would take that into account. If those people were going to have enough sway on the organization that they could decide to, not buy into a movement. So I think it's a very sharp question. It's great. It's a great point. And that's how we would do it, is just be as inclusive as we possibly can be.
So Chris, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think that is the response is spot on. I think another way to rephrase the question is to say, an organization that is already investing in its corporate social responsibility, why should they be interested in anything like this?
Right.
That would be a rather naive way of looking at it. CSR always seems to still be within the space of meeting your very functional objective, which might be, let's make money. But then for us to make money, let's appear as a good citizen by giving back to the society. That is CSR. This has a higher level of importance, something pretty emotional, which would be, for instance, it is not CSR if, for instance, you had, I don't know what you called, what was the NFA guy? Is it Colin Kaepernick for Nike?
Yeah, Colin Kaepernick.
Yes, right. So it is not CSR for Nike. You can't call that CSR anymore. It's a form of saying that there is an enemy in the society right now. The enemy that comes against equality, the enemies that come against respecting people, the enemies that stands against people's need, freedom to express themselves, to feel like they are part of the American fabric, so to say. And therefore, we as a brand, we think that we need to align ourselves with this kind of thing, not necessarily because in fact, it's a risk. It has to, I would say cultural movement itself tend to have an element of risk with it, element of risk that seem to almost threaten the brand in itself. Maybe like because you are doing this, you might just be going against the government, or because you're doing this, you might be hurting certain class of people in the society, and therefore you should not do it. But then in itself, that is why it's a cultural movement, because you need to make a strong stand, about something social, about some kind of event that is going on in society. So within the context of Nigeria, how do we exactly tell stakeholders? How do we convince them? It's going to be a journey, right? And the journey might go in the way of finding it easy to reference Nigerian brands who have been able to do cultural movement well, so that they become like case stories that we can reference. And maybe then they can then say, okay, because this is happening, therefore we should also do that. Then there might be a bit of education that still needs to go into the whole thing. And then just like Dan said, and I suppose within the advertising context, when you have your client service department, there's always that room for you to sit your clients down and tell them that on the one hand, we need to meet this need, which could be ranging from, price point, promotion, and what have you. But there is the other thing about social imperative. And sit them down, go through that process. Perhaps it's going to be something like some kind of breakout session. I suppose over time, when we do that, one or two brands, we could just have some easy luck where they can then say, let's try this, right? So now we have NSAS going on. In a way, I know Nigerian brands have been trying to sort of hint at their support of the movement. But then, okay, you can also tell that they are also trying to be careful not to hurt, the powers that be. But then, but you imagine having a brand that literally just comes out from nowhere and says that we believe that every young Nigerian, right, needs to be respected. Young people are the future, and all of those kind of, general statements. And therefore, as a brand, we believe that if we do not support this big dream, if we do not support this yearning, if we do not support this agitation, we are not going to be hurting ourselves as a brand. We are going to be hurting the society. And therefore, whoever it is that might feel, funny or uncomfortable, unpleasant about this, we are not addressing you. We are not taking care of your concern. We are taking care of the higher purpose, which is the fact that in 40 or 50 years' time, young people of now can look back and say that we were part of the movement that made Nigeria better. Then that is cultural movement.
Wow, what a time to be alive. If we actually do have Nigerian brands who will come out and take a stance and just say, this is where we are, this is where we're not, and that would just be really fantastic. Thank you so much for that very, very insightful response, Chris and Dan. We have a couple more questions, and then I think we can slowly close the curtain on today's edition. So this question, just for clarification, he's asking, is there a difference between the movement marketing and cause marketing? Cause as in C-A-U-S-E, cause marketing. Is there a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say yes, there's a difference, and I'll dig into that, but not exclusively. So it doesn't have to always be a difference. I would say that cause marketing sometimes is doing a movement, and cause marketing sometimes I think you'll find is is working with the right tension, and it's just kind of a movement baked in. But what I find with cause marketing is that you'll find these nonprofits and brands that are exclusively kind of for a cause. So, it might be like a Slum to School or something like that, versus a movement marketing. What we're constantly trying to do is convince bigger corporate brands that they can have, that they do have a purpose, and that they should activate it in the world through marketing. So like if you take Coca-Cola, for example, or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily say everything Coca-Cola does is cause marketing initiative, So we would say, hey guys, you know, you can do movement marketing, and that might be for sustainability, which is an example that you just touched on in fashion, but it could be done through recycling, or it could be, I mean, just to draw on something that they've done over the years, happiness. You know, what does happiness mean from a mental health perspective, and how do we turn that into a movement? So there's a distinction in that we want every brand, whether they see themselves as a cause or not, to realize that they have a cause and they have a purpose that they should be activating in the world through a movement. And that's where I think the line is between the two.
Okay, cool. The other question that we have here from Olutayo says, what's the best process to approach and identify the human point that you can drive your movement marketing to in regards to brands and services? So how do you like get the human point, to identify the human point, if at all you need to identify some human point in your approach?
So is it where, this is the question, where in the process we do that, or?
Yeah, he's asking what the best approach, the best process to approach that identification is. I'm not sure if it's with discussing maybe with the leadership of the organization, or discussing, like you said, with other external stakeholders. How are you able to identify the human point with which you can drive your movement marketing?
We're big on research, actually, in the upfront part of the process. So a lot of times during this strategy phase, we'll work with consumers or employees. Like if it's for a movement insight, for example, and we're only going to talk to employees of an organization, we'll work very closely with those employees. So we'll do, you know, whether it's focus groups or surveys or interviews or all of the above, to really understand them and to learn them and learn about them and what makes them tick. And so, so therefore we're never winging it and just trying to make it up. So as it relates to understanding what's going to appeal to those people. And then if they're customers, we do the same thing. It's one of the first things we do actually in our process working with a client, is all of this research. So if it's a customer, it could be focus groups, qual, quant. There's a lot of primary research that we do. We also do this interesting thing where we'll gather a group of experts that are like, let's say we're working in the healthcare space. We'll gather a group of experts, not only in healthcare, but it could be a journalist who writes about it. It could be a technologist who develops an app for health purposes. It could be people who work directly in healthcare. It could be a holistic wellness person that's, you know, maybe, you know, looking at natural medicinal remedies and therapies and stuff, and bring those people together in a room, which we can't do right now, but we would do it over Zoom. And we're looking for a bigger cultural idea to play with that's appealing to people as well. And so there's a lot of things that come out of those sessions that end up being really resonant, just from a general human standpoint. So, you know, in a nutshell, the answer is that we're big on the research up front to get that right for people before we, you know, approach the creative work. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure. I apologize if I misunderstood the question.
Okay, I think you nailed it with a response. So I'm just going to give my the last question to just conclude our conversation. And we've stressed and talked about what movement marketing is. We've provided some insight into the benefits that it has.
She froze there.
We have a movement here. End freezer. End freezer. Hashtag end freezer.
Yeah, it was probably a really hard question to answer. So then it just froze up the whole thing. Okay, so it's frozen for you too, not just me. Oh man. Well, we can wait. We can wait it out a little bit.
Oh yeah.
See if it unfreezes. Whoops. Let's see. I'm sure she's dropping off and coming back on. Chris, I'll have to check out your project, Brainwaves Daily.
Oh, yeah? Oh, thank you.
I'll have to check that out there. I know you mentioned it on Instagram.
Yeah, some random thing.
Well, nice. I know there's a lot of different things that you do.
Yeah, but I don't know if unfortunately, I'm not rich for any.
That's not the number one thing that matters, right?
I know.
Are you in Legos too, Chris?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I
Cool.
think I met Scott one time in Europe. I can't recall. Probably in 2011. I'm not sure. It seems to me that I don't know whether there was a strawberry frog exhibition in France, at Cannes. I'm not sure. But
That's very possible. Very possible. I'll ask him. I'll mention your name and ask him.
Yeah, I probably remember, but I think I've met him once.
He at the time, it's possible that he was still living in Europe actually, but he was most likely at Cannes, so it's a very good chance of that. Yeah, I've seen all of his pictures from Cannes and from different campaigns that he's done in Europe and being with the football teams over there and everything. So there's a good possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, and I read his book. I think I read that book like years ago or last year.
Nice. Yeah, great. Thank you. That's awesome. I'll let him know that too. We'll send you a copy of the new one when it comes out next year.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Thank you. For you and everybody else. Well, I guess we're still just waiting for this to unfreeze. So maybe here we go.
I think she's back.
All right. Good stuff.
Hi, I got disconnected there.
No problem.
Yeah, so sorry about that. So I don't know if you got my last question that I was asking. It was me asking why brands should care about movement marketing for 2020 and beyond 2020.
Yeah. Maybe I have an answer to that, Chris.
What was the question? Why should brands?
Why should they care? Why should they care? Why should organizations care about movement marketing? Why is this something they should leverage on for this year and beyond?
Yeah.
I think that maybe like two reasons. I have like two reasons in my head. One would be, without necessarily sounding religious, there seems to be like a moral obligation on the part of any organization, right, to stand for something. Because overall, whether you are in the private sector, in the public sector, or you're an individual, whatever it is, we all have some kind of unconscious common goal to live in a society that works. So whether you're a brand or whatever it is, there seems to be some kind of moral duty to be part of something that will make the society good. And I think cultural movement readily gives brands an opportunity to start that, to tap into that. Then the other thing again is the way the world is going right now, so far, the past maybe a couple of years now, 5, 6, 7 years now, there's a whole lot of, nationalism going on. There's a whole lot of, people are whipping up. It's strong emotions about anything. And then you have, these soldiers or people, these people call them soldiers who are busy on the internet, saying something, writing and all of this kind of thing. So a brand that wants to be part of that conversation, right, would have to also consider the importance and significance of cultural movement, because it readily gives you the opportunity to be part of the zeitgeist. It gives you the opportunity to be part of conversation. It gives you the opportunity to mean something beyond the everyday that you are to them. So on those two fronts, one on the moral obligation of it, and also the fact that the new world order requires that you're part of a conversation that is not merely because of what you're selling, but something that is deeper, that touches certain core, in the human nature. So those two reasons I would say are even enough for brands to care about cultural movement.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think that's a great answer. So I would say this: it's what people want. It's what your employees want. They want to work for a place that they know stands for something bigger than just making money. They want to feel a sense of belonging when they work there. And that's why we do Movement Inside is to help out from that standpoint. So it's going to help you with hiring. It's going to help you with retaining people so that they want to continue to come to work every day. Certainly something that we focus on as an employer at Strawberry Frog. And I'm sure Chris has that in mind as a leader too. And I know that you and Perez do too, with Arden and Newton. So it's the same for brands. People will leave, employees, young people especially, they just won't stay if they know that you don't stand for anything. So that's one. And number two, it's the same thing with customers and consumers. People are smart. The buyer is very smart. And especially with the next generation of people coming up, they want to buy brands that stand for something more, and they're paying attention to that. So it's going to, for business purposes, inside and out, it's really, really important. And it's simply keeping the person in mind. It's really what your buyer wants. And so I would say for the health and wellness of your business, it's really imperative.
Wow. Thank you so much. This has really been very, very insightful time out with you, Dan and Chris. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the expert responses that you attended to all the questions. So without further ado, I also thank everyone who has joined in. Thank you so much to all of our attendees. And of course, to the colleagues, my team members at Arden Newton, thank you all so much as well for your time. For those who would like to stay in touch, you can connect with Dan at strawberryfrog.com. Yes, and then Chris said that he has interesting posts that he shares on his Instagram, a daily, I think I lost that when we lost the connection, but you can check him out. However, like we said earlier, all of this webinar.
My name is everyone.
Yeah.
my name is the same everywhere on social media. Chris Ogunlowo, Instagram, everywhere.
Fabulous, awesome. So we will still share all of those details with you when we share the recorded version of this webinar to your inbox for those of you who have joined this conversation. And this is brought to you courtesy of Arden Newton, Nigeria's leading brand strategy consultancy, which helps brands and corporate with their corporate transformation, narrative development, and market activation. So we look forward to having more of this with you in the coming weeks and coming months, and we hope that you're going to be a part of it. Once again, my name is Chioma, and it's been a pleasure hosting you this evening. Thank you all so much for your time. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely evening.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you too. Thank you.
All right, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Please check your inbox for the recorded webinar.